the UK general election results. What to do next?
Hello and welcome to the Mark and Pete Show. Well, the UK general election results are in. There's been lots of congratulating, lots of commiserating, and lots of confusion. What is next for the United Kingdom? Well, here's to set the scene. The ballot box is still shaking. A new political dawn has woken. The United Kingdom is quaking, and voters have spoken. Campaigning was painstaking, a Tory win by the same token. But now for more muckraking, as Labour is just broken. Yes, Clergyman Pete, surprising results, I think, with Boris Johnson getting a huge majority. But what next for the United Kingdom, and what are the key things that he needs to address?
Yes, what next? Just a brief note, our prediction here on the Mark and Pete Show was a 20 majority. We got it wrong. But actually, we said there'd be a working majority, but then so did everyone else. So we'll just gloss over that and say, yes.
We didn't factor in inflation, did we?
Yeah, well, yes, that's true. So, yes, it was a surprise result to us as well. Before I say anything, just remember 1 Timothy 2, chapter 1, where it talks about what your attitude should be to those who have been put in authority, kings and all those in authority. We should pray for them. Why? So that we can live peaceful and quiet lives. So if there's any hope of that, keep praying, ladies and gentlemen and gentle listeners, for Boris Johnson, who, yes, has got this role in government as Prime Minister, leading the way. What should he do next? Well, the next thing to do, there's a very specific thing he needs to do, two to be precise. He needs to set forth his Queen's speech, which is, for those who are not familiar with the British government procedures, it's basically a speech which sets out the major acts of Parliament you're going to get passed and the major policies that you're going to pursue in this first lot of Parliament. Basically until the Parliament's dissolved again. So, what are you going to do over the next year? I suppose would be the easiest way to say. But it's meant to set the seed for what you're going to do in your first term, which would take, in this case, it would take, say, 5 years' time. We're not due for another election for 5 years. But the other thing is, he needs to appoint a cabinet. So he's going to be appointing people into different positions to lead his government. He already has people in position, but he may well want to make some changes because, of course, he'll be governing in a very different way now. Things have changed. He meets people with different skills. It's not a question of trying to wheedle things through Parliament and trying to cleverly get your own way. You're basically in a position to get through what you want to. So the question, so different skills are required. So it may well be that different people are put in place, and you specifically want people to be put in place to be good at negotiating trade deals and have a strong, firm but approachable stance in foreign policy. So I think these setting policy objectives and getting the right people in place to carry them out. These are the key things. This is the next. I mean, he'll be doing this over the next couple of days.
Let's get to the nuggets. Get to the nuggets because there are. I'm going to say there are probably 6 things that I think he needs to address. Clearly, yes, folks. We hopefully will be saying this for the last time in 2020. Get Brexit done. Clearly, that's one of the things that he has to do, and we'll talk about that. The NHS.
I think he mentioned it. Yeah.
Definitely on his plate, the NHS, and I think the social care crisis generally is another issue. We know that that's important, but we also know that the climate change targets and sorting that out. I would also come on to the fact that Britain's infrastructure sort of linked to that with the flooding that we've seen in 2019 and in previous years. Something has to be done with the investment. We also know that once Brexit's done, that the negotiation with the EU and other countries about immigration is critical. But the one big thing that now comes to light on Boris's big plate, this mountain that sits before him, is the United Kingdom. and certainly the Scotland issue. So there are lots of things that he's got to tackle. Let's take the Brexit issue first. Are we confident, as he says, with his oven ready, deal ready to go, are we due to see that on the 31st of January that we will be out of Europe? How confident are you?
Well, I mean, looking at it as it now stands, with such a big majority, with the majority being seen to be has been due to decisions he's made, to his personality as well. He's in such a strong position politically. He's got a lot of political capital, that is to say, people recognise his authority, and including people in the European Union realise with that amount of authority to make decisions and to push things through Parliament, they're going to have a very different attitude to him. And I think even without that, he was able to get Theresa May's withdrawal treaty changed. I think he's going to push it through. It's going to get through. The European Union have signalled, these are the new people in place in the European Union, have signalled that they're going to ratify it. So it's going to happen, folks. We're actually going to leave.
Well,
Plan
does
your
that
Brexit
mean,
parties.
folks, our business listeners will be rubbing their hands with glee on the idea that hopefully we will have some idea of what we're working towards, what kind of terms that they will issue, how do they even consider things such as trading arrangements, supply chain, and all those sort of things, even human resources, folks, yes.
Now, I know it's a small sample, but I've been talking with a few small business owners in this area, which is in the northwest of England around the Wirral. And what they were saying was for them, and they felt for most small businesses, of course it depends, as you were mentioning, supply chain. It depends on your specific supply chain, and it depends on whether you've got a particular trading relationship with Europe. But in general, small businesses are going to be better off out of the EU. I mean, the lower regulations, etc., the lack of having to be in regulatory alignment with the EU, when you don't have a whole department on compliance like a big company can, it can have a devastating effect. So you're freed up from that. You actually. So anyway, I think that it's that if Boris Johnson manages to do this is going to be great, right, for small businesses.
That's good, but clearing that off the plate as we move along.
Yes, scrape it off the plate.
Of appetizing subjects that he's got to deal with.
Yes.
The one thing that does seem to be now very clear is the domestic issues. Yes. Because he can't ignore the fact that the NHS has been such an emotive subject with the general election. Now he's presented with the fact that he has to invest. He's promised that there will be investment in nursing and many other resources. How does he tackle this? Because it's a crumbling service. There's also the other issue that was raised, certainly by the Labour Party, about his allegiance on possible backroom deals with, yes, the Americans, Donald Trump. Are the NHS, workers and anybody else who favours the NHS, should they be worried about whether the United States will have more of an influence over the NHS, or was that just simply a red herring?
Well, let's just do a little thought experiment for a moment in response to that. Imagine for a moment that you're in the United States of America land. Maybe you're the president and or one of his negotiating team for a trade deal. And someone said, oh, look, here's the NHS. We'd like to sell it to you. You'd be laughed out of the place. I'd want to buy that. It's inefficient. It's bloated. It doesn't have as good outcomes as some of our hospitals over here in the. No, of course they don't want to do that. What they do want, and this is the key thing, where there is some truth to how you could be basically abused in a trade deal, is that the pharmaceutical companies in the US want preferential treatment in access to NHS markets. Now, but that's part of the negotiation. I don't see that it's a problem being open to that, because even if as an overall trade deal you gave around that, then it could be a quid pro quo, to use a popular phrase at the moment, and you get it somewhere else. So no, I think that is a mistaken idea. It was part of the election campaign to claim that the Tories are going to sell the NHS. That was never going to happen. And indeed the documents that were produced by Jeremy Corbyn to show that this was the case showed nothing of the sort.
Well, I think that certainly, as we already enjoy at this moment in time, ironically, and we've talked about this in previous shows, that actually we get a pretty good deal with the US pharmaceutical drugs, because if you are a citizen of America land, as you keep putting, is that actually you'd be paying eight times more if you're in America. So whether that changes and whether we're going to now be subject to hikes in pricing, we will have to see. But there's something associated
Unlikely,
with the
I would
NHS.
say.
There's something associated with this, which really Boris Johnson now has to think about the long term. Yes, folks, we like long-termism. But Boris Johnson has to recognise that the population of the UK, and not just the UK, all really country leaders have to face this. People are living longer. And certainly thinking about the
What, you
system.
thinking of a cull, are you?
Well,
kill them off?
I would recommend not.
Okay. Fair enough. Yes, fair enough.
Probably not a vote winner for the next time. But he has to think.
I was joking, everyone.
Oh, yes, we'll get letters from someone. But for our one listener. But
probably just a bunch of old people, so it doesn't matter. Yeah.
But the fact is, it is a serious subject.
Yes,
and it has been underinvested. Now, the one thing that we do want to say is that these aren't exact figures, but here's the thing that's facing everybody, whether you are in this situation or whether you're even in your teens. If you think about the amount of money that you have to pay as an individual, subject to means testing, but typically care self to keep any individual in a care home can range anything from £25,000 up to £50,000, depending on your condition.
Yes.
That's a lot of money. And one of the things that is concerning for individuals is how do they pay for that? So Boris Johnson has to try and think of ways to minimise the impact, but also have an infrastructure and policies that help people to plan better for their future. So do you think that this is something that he's really going to address, or is it going to be another Tory neglect story?
Well, you're asking me this. This is the question that I think we need answering. I mean, there's a lot of promise with Boris Johnson, because if you do look at his capabilities in understanding of complex issues, his writing, which is trawled for sort of gotcha quotes, is actually intelligent writing, and he does show a good understanding of political issues. And there's no reason to think that he can't put a team in place to get the NHS up to a good standard. The problem is, I'm pretty convinced, that it's going to cost a lot of money, whatever you do, if you're going to go that route. And the direction that you would really need to go is actually to abandon the overall overarching nature of the NHS and slim it down such that it's like a safety net. Health service. That's the way that we'll have to go at some point. I don't believe that a populist like Boris Johnson is going to do that. So I think he is going to try and come up with a way to finesse it, to come up with a way to finagle it to work in its current way, but maybe getting better, getting actually better deals for pharmaceuticals and equipment, which is phenomenally expensive in specialist areas. That I think that he is going to do. I don't think he's going to go anyway down the correct route, which would be not to privatise the NHS. That's a wrong way of looking at it, but to allow private medical firms to take over a lot of the work, and have the NHS really as a safety net, which was how it was originally envisaged.
Well, yeah,
that's the only way to be affordable.
It's a big concern, and although it didn't actually sort of rise to the surface in the election, it's certainly going to rise after Brexit sorted out.
Well, I would say is that the Labour Party tried to make it rise to the surface, and it did briefly, according to some polling, raised to equal with Brexit. But no, it was Brexit all the way, really, in the election. Yeah.
But there is one thing that he does have to address, and there's sort of two angles to this next subject, which is about climate change.
Yep,
we all know that environmental challenges affect all countries, and we've seen even in 2019, and we'll see them more in 2020 onwards, that environmental issues are high on the agenda for certain communities. We saw lots of flooding in the north of England, and in fact, actually, Boris Johnson himself was considered to be a little bit tardy with his responses. Now, climate change is one thing, which is on a global level, but domestically, surely he now has to think about the infrastructure. One thing that didn't come up, and it did come up in the previous two elections, ironically, was the underfunding of investment in infrastructure, such as roads, potholes, not enough flood defences, and also the dredging of rivers and many other issues around sort of environmental issues that affect the United Kingdom. Do you think that you see Boris Johnson as green? Do you think he has this on his agenda? Because for some reason, I'm not convinced that he is. Maybe he might say the right thing at certain certain.
Yeah, I think you're right.
Is he really
yes.
really an environmentalist?
Well, I hope not. I think that the current state of environmental activism just gives the lie to what's the real priorities are, which you were alluding to there. What we really need to do was to look at the real problems of pollution and of protecting the environment, protecting against flooding and all that, this sort of thing. Protecting people's environment is real environmental concerns, not some sort of esoteric idea about it would be bad sometime in the future if the global temperature went up too much, which is really the position we're in. So I think that he isn't like that. I mean, it really is a Tory issue, interestingly. If you go back to, who was really championing this idea of there being a problem with the environment, it was Margaret Thatcher. She's the one who started the rot. I mean, started the this sort of thinking in mainstream politics. And I don't think he is, no. I think that there will be commitments to, international agreements and that sort of thing. Now, this is a problem in that these sort of commitments can be very expensive, and also could. I know we've talked about this previously, but just to highlight at this point, it could lead to the complete breakdown of the economy, not just of our economy, across the West, if we're going to set ridiculous.
Being carbon neutral,
carbon
2050,
neutral,
I think it is what they're predicting, or at least he says that's what he's committed to.
Yes.
So I think just on a technical point, I think there are two ways of weaving around this subject. To literally have no carbon footprint is impractical, because it would mean that we'd have to close down all petrochemical companies, and
bring the horses
we wouldn't
back.
have any plastics, we wouldn't have any gas, electricity, water, and so on. It just wouldn't.
It's unfeasible.
But what we can talk about is how do you minimise the impact on the environment, where in some cases we're not polluting our rivers, we're not polluting our oceans with plastics,
exactly.
etc.
This is what he should do. Yes.
On the actual environmental side, clearly anything where minimising of coal is definitely a help. We know that on an international level, China being a guilty culprit on that front, that's where the pressures need to be certainly placed. So I think he has the opportunity on an international level as well as a domestic.
Yes, he does. I just want to champion one form of energy which is extremely clean, and that is nuclear energy. I know that it's politically unpopular, but if he's going to do it at all, to do it straight away, to say, well, we're going to be investing in nuclear energy, would be brilliant and put us ahead. We'd end up with cheaper energy costs. It will put our industry ahead of the rest of the world. He should really announce investment into nuclear energy as soon as possible.
Okay, let's move on. We've got a couple more subjects to tackle, which are really important.
Immigration. Let's go through them.
So immigration is a really key thing. Now, there's two levels to this, which is how do you manage it better, but also, and again from a business perspective, how do you bring in the right people with the right skills under the right terms for the right industries? Now, he has said that there is no doubt that, and this was an issue with Theresa May, that we would bring up the borders, tighten up the control. But it's not just about border control. It's about having the right people brought in, and also those people who can stay. What are the conditions for staying in the UK when it comes to immigration? So what are your thoughts with the way he'll tackle that?
Well, the way that he said he'll tackle it is to bring in what he refers to as an Australian-style points-based system. This is one of the issues where even the very language he uses is exactly from Nigel Farage's mouth, because he had been championing that for years. And that's not to say it's wrong, of course. So I think that's what that's will be his aim, to control immigration by a points-based system. That is to say, it depends on what contribution you're going to make to Britain. Now, that could be to the economy, but it could be to important services like the NHS. Now, the other thing that I think would make a big difference is this distinction, to make sure there's an absolute distinction between coming to work at a specific job, then you have to leave afterwards, and actually coming to stay in the country. And I think that there should be an assumption that you're going to leave. I think you should have to go at the end of your contract. And that is, by the way, that just simply isn't the case now. It's very easy to just come and to stay. And this will severely reduce the increase in the population, the need for the housing. It will reduce hugely the costs, the costs that we have overloading the NHS and the housing problem. So I think that he sees this. He's made allusions to that during the campaign. If this is in the Queen's speech, that he's looking to introduce a points-based system of some sort, well, this would be very good for the country.
It is, and the timing is crucial because, when we're actually thinking about on an international scale how we build our economy and build relationships with not just America, but with China and anywhere else, this is going to be a key part of our economy because it is also fundamental, and we know this, we rely on skill sets from abroad, wherever they may be. It's not just from mainland Europe. So he really must get this in place very quickly, in my opinion, for economy to succeed. Now I'm going to come to probably, I think personally, his biggest subject, and it's Scotland. Now, as we know, the SNP, the Scottish National Party, did very well in the 2019 general election.
Yeah, sure.
They uplifted their representation, but critically, they are still championing the idea of having a referendum for independence. Now, of course, if Boris Johnson gets his way and we come out of Europe, Brexit is done, the deal is done, we move forward, that clears the way for the United Kingdom to do what it needs to do. But domestically, it's got a difficult stakeholder within its fold.
Well,
Nicola Sturgeon, let me close out this point.
Yes,
Nicola Sturgeon has made it very, very clear that whatever happens, that the Scottish Parliament will certainly move forward with possibly, and this could be one of his challenges, possibly with the opinion of actually going ahead with a referendum, irrespective with the endorsement of Westminster. So let's take about the biggest issue. How does Boris Johnson quash the SNP and the breakup of the United Kingdom?
Well, let's just take the phone call for a start. Nicola Sturgeon did phone Boris Johnson shortly after the results were known and put to him that she wanted a faculty to be able to hold a referendum. Now, as it stands at the moment, the legal position is unless the Westminster government grants this faculty, in other words, devolves this power down to the Scottish government, she can't do it. And he said no, because two reasons: he was in favour of keeping the union, but also that the previous referendum of 2015, in which the Scots voted to stay in the United Kingdom, should be respected. So he has no intention of changing it. Now, of course, political stunts like holding a referendum, even if it's not an official one, could be tried. It'd be very expensive. But I think it would be a big mistake for the SNP, as you point out, particularly if we've left the EU already. Yeah. You see, I don't think that there is a strong appetite for leaving. I think that this is mistaken. People vote for the Scottish National Party because there's a key word in the name of their party, and that is Scottish. And when people vote for it, it's an expression of their pride in their nation, their nationalism. And they see, people in Scotland would understandably see the Conservatives as being an English party. So they vote for the Scottish National Party. Even though the Scottish National Party has badly let them down, they're responsible for the health service in Scotland and have, maybe not for not for the overall budget, but for the running of it. And they have really messed up. There's scandal after scandal. So I don't think it's to do with a particular love for Nicola Sturgeon, or indeed for her constant going on about leaving the United Kingdom. I think it's simply people being nationalistic, and if it came to a referendum, it'd be the same as last time.
Well, exactly. Now, the other thing as well, of course, is that obviously, should they do it, and then you might all argue that, should we say, it wouldn't technically be a referendum, it could be a survey, if you want, whatever you want to call it, effectively, if it's not endorsed by Westminster. But the point being is that it would be probably interesting, even as a result, what that would be. I mean, my view is this, and we've talked about this on other shows, but I think it's not in the interest, ironically, for Scotland to be independent. Think of the impracticalities of trying to get, the UK out of Europe. But can you imagine trying to get Scotland out of the UK? I mean, it would just be a nightmare, and I can't see how it could be practical for anyone. No. So that's my take.
No, I like the fact that you've just taken us through big policy areas. I do want to just add one more, and that's you could talk about it in terms of policing, but what I really mean is civil order. I think it's looking like there's a problem with what used to be thought of as the multiculturalism in the country. In fact, is a series of ghettos, and some of these ghettos are getting to be city-wide or city centre-wide. And so we're seeing mixtures of cultures which do not get on together. And alongside that, you're seeing an adaptation of the old gang culture in Britain to be aligned sometimes on religious and ethnic lines. And so what we could be seeing is, you could see something paradoxical, like more affluence coming to Britain, the Tories handling business well. These things could happen if we leaving the EU. Maybe there's a boost, and we could see the whole of the country fall into disarray because of these infighting between different groups within the country. And we're not talking about the Scots and the British playing football, Scots and English playing football. We're talking about serious fighting happening. That needs to be addressed on a cultural level. I mean, we can't really deal with it now. Just sort of flag that up, that is an issue. And he's not, and this Boris Johnson and the Conservative government haven't even flagged it up that it's a problem.
Well, one final point, which is something that Boris Johnson will have to address, not necessarily in his first few weeks, may not even be his first few months. He's going to have to face a leader of the opposition. We see that Jeremy Corbyn has made it clear that he probably would like to stay on, but the likelihood is he won't. And we will probably need to dedicate a whole show to this, but let's just quickly close out. Where do you think that, if you think maybe in 2020, which almost certainly it will be, who do you think he will be facing across the dispatch box? Maybe in, say, the next second quarter of 2020.
Well, let's just say, first of all, the way that the parliamentary government of Britain works, you need a strong opposition to hold the government to account. And
we certainly haven't had one.
And we haven't had one, and we do need a credible opposition. And Keir Starmer, who is leading light in the Labour Party, he's more centrist in his views, is seen as being credible, and by the book is seen as being the favourite. I think Coral has him as 2-1 on, so if you want to put on a little flutter, go ahead. He could well be the next leader, according to the bookies. But there's a fly in the ointment to this, in that the membership of the party, Labour Party, so I'm not talking about the MPs, the rank and file membership, suddenly swelled shortly before Corbyn got into power as the leader, by people being offered a much cheaper membership offer. And so they've got loads and loads of members who obviously wanted Corbyn. So who would they vote for this time? Probably not Keir Starmer. So I'm afraid it may well be someone else, maybe someone who isn't a big name at the moment, but who more closely aligns with this sort of, I suppose, left wing, and as you say, like the momentum faction within the Labour Party. This would be a disaster for the Labour Party, and therefore for Britain. As I say, we need a strong opposition.
Well, indeed. Well, political times are tough, and as we've seen year by year, a great influx of issues, and we don't know what we're going to get from Boris Johnson's government. But listeners, what do you think? Do you feel that actually Boris Johnson is now set ready to take Britain out of Europe, finally, and more importantly, address the issues that we have been talking about and many, many others? Well, Mr. Johnson, here's a little bit of advice. When you think about political times, things can go well, but things may not go well. Politics talks with every hour. Politics talks the praises shower. Politics talks your fortunes flower. Politics talks from your ivory tower. Politics talks, then things turn sour. Politics talks, the voters cower. Politics talks, you lose your power. So, Johnson, we hope that you get it right. Otherwise, you'll be out. Well, thank you for listening to the show, and join us again next time for more colourful conversations with Clergyman Pete and Businessman Mark.